Hello, and welcome to a special live edition of Oxwide. We've changed our format a bit this week because we want to address some of the concerns we know you'll have about the changing COVID-19 regulations and the possibility of some of us having to self-isolate. I'm actually on my fourth day of self-isolating after one of my two children returned to school and, of course, got a cough and a bit of a temperature. So she and her sister are downstairs, and me and my wife, we now have to self-isolate until we get our test results back. And the testing programme, I think it's fair to say, is struggling a bit with demand right now. So there'll be a number of us finding ourselves in these positions, both people with children at school, but also those of us who get the sort of seasonal bugs you'd expect to see. But we thought anyway, with the way that things are changing and with what's been in the news about COVID, that we'd take a chance to have a different kind of conversation this week. Later in the programme, we'll be joined by Maria Tanner from our Children and Young People Service and Debbie Wheddon from Workforce, and they'll do their best to answer some of the questions that have come our way. Across the Trust at the minute, it's been great to see people coming back from holidays. I think we've all needed a holiday, and if you haven't had one yet, make sure you do get that break, because we've got quite a tough winter ahead of us, and it's important we look after each other and think about our well-being. And we've also done a lot of work on building a fairer Oxley's after the conversations that we had earlier this year, in part triggered by the letter I wrote about Black Lives Matter, but also about the wider concerns we have about how we make this a trust where fairness is shown as something that matters in the way that we recruit and support people. And it'd be good to talk to you a bit more about that in an Oxwide in a couple of weeks. And if you've been watching the programme recently, you'll have seen we've been talking a lot about that. But that really is starting to come together in a great action plan now, and the board were delighted to hear the progress we've made next week. As I've said before, though, the proof will be in the delivery. And before we go to our live panel though this week, we've got a short film to show you. Last week, Lisa Tan popped over to Goldie Lee to speak to the Greenwich Children's Physiotherapy team, who are part of the wider integrated therapies team, and they've been talking about how they managed to stay connected with the children they care for over the past few months, and about their plans for the tricky period ahead of us.
Could you tell us what the children's services, specialist children's services here at Goldie Lee do?
Yeah, so we provide paediatric physiotherapy to any child that lives in the Greenwich Borough that has a Greenwich GP between the age of 0 and 25. They've still got an educational healthcare plan. And it's very wide ranging, so for that reason we have 3 specialist strands. So we have an early years strand, a mainstream strand and a special school strand, and each strand will obviously see children within them age groups. We see anything from a rheumatological condition, a neurology condition, orthopaedic conditions, musculoskeletal conditions. So yeah, it's very wide ranging. And I suppose the level of input we give to each child would depend on the clinical need.
Right, so you could see children from those who might just have, say, a broken finger, right up to the more extreme cases that need far more support.
Yes, definitely. And also, I forgot to say, we also have a rapid response strand of our service, so that them kind of real high level needing intensive rehab, we have a part of our service that can pick up children quite quickly. Right. But it could be that we could see somebody from a sprained ankle to someone that's recovering from major head trauma. So
Chinazam, I know that you've been working on lots of online services and how you can continue to have services provided whilst the COVID situation continues. Can you tell us what you've been working on for children's services?
So since the COVID outbreak, we continue to run our service, but this time around we're using virtual medium to reach our children. And as you may have it, we're reaching even more children because they're able to attend these sessions with us. And in addition to the picture programs that we give them, we are now working on video programs to make it more interactive for these children to engage in exercises. Currently, we're working with Luca, who has been gracious to join us with these exercises, and it's been great working with him.
So Luca, I think you must be really fit by now, because I've been watching you on all of those videos, doing all the exercises, rolling the football up and down the wall. So how have you found that?
Yeah, it's been good. It's good to help the children because they're not as fortunate as me, are they? So yeah, it's good to do that, and it's just nice to do the exercises.
Yeah, so it's good for you to get fit as well, while you're helping other people, other children, who perhaps, as you say, aren't quite as mobile and aren't as lucky as us.
Yeah.
Yeah, so a big part of what we normally do here is running groups. So what we're just trying to do is retain some of the fun of that. So we're, I guess, using our imaginations as much as possible. So currently today you can see me and Claire are kitted out in our jungle attire. We've been over in the woods opposite and filming some jungle scenes, and this one specifically is for our movement coordination group. So these are children that struggle with coordination activities, so we're doing throwing, catching and moving in different ways, so we're over there trying to incorporate that into a jungle environment. So Chinnism's already spoke a bit about the exercise bit we're doing, but previous to that we've done some fine motor. So this is that was more for the OT service, but I had a go at making a fine motor Olympics. So it was just a way to make it a bit more fun and a bit more competitive for the children. So I was doing various fine motor activities and recording a time and then challenging the children to have a go at beating that.
Blink and you'll miss it. Wow, that was fast. In fact, it's a new world record. Unbelievable scenes. Let's have another look. I know I need to see it again. Mr. Fine Motor has announced himself on the biggest stage of all. Incredible.
Claire, what's the feedback been like from the patients, from families, from children? What have they been saying about some of the different sort of films that you provided for them and how they found it?
Well, this film that we're doing now is our first sort of film like this that the children will be doing for physio. But we did run a virtual strengthening group, Tim and myself, with sort of 4 children on one screen. So that was quite a challenge to get them to do that. But I think the feedback that we got from those parents and children was that I think they quite enjoyed having each other on the screen, didn't they? And working. So Tim was on the floor sort of doing the exercises, and I had the iPad so that I could see what the children were doing.
Yeah.
And then Tim was demonstrating and talking them through, and then I could talk to them on there and say, oh, you need to just do it a little bit more like this, or so I think they found it really helpful.
Oh, that's good. So do you think, although some of these new ways of working came about as a result of the pandemic, do you think these are some of the things that you'll keep going forward beyond the pandemic? So you'll continue to do some virtual and online?
Definitely, and I think it's also made us have a tighter time frame to do these things, because all these things would have been on, like, especially within early years, that kind of developmental bank of exercises and ideas for parents. That's something that we would have liked to have done before Corona, but we've had that kind of real sort of push to do it, and the technological support, which we maybe wouldn't have had so much before. So I think some of it we're definitely going to keep, and some of it we would have done if we had more time.
Yeah.
So
and I think we found a better attendance to some of the groups. So whereas our group is like 6 weeks normally, and you would have people coming here for that one session for 6 weeks, you may have times when they don't turn up, or they don't come for whatever reason. But I think they've found it easier to attend every session because it's virtual and they're at home. Yeah. Obviously it's going to be a bit different when they're back at school, but it's been...
That's another important aspect actually though, isn't it? The fact that it is much easier than having to get everybody together and get everything out of the house.
And I think especially for some of our really complex families where the child might have a feeding tube, they might be ventilated, they might need regular meds. For us to provide that intervention in their home virtually, and especially the established families that we know really well, I think it's been working very well with us.
Yeah.
Because it just makes their life a lot easier, because you know the families pre-COVID, so then you can kind of just have a real effective virtual appointment.
So it's really positive then that something positive has actually come through faster as a result of the pandemic. So there are some things I suppose to be grateful for in a way.
Yeah. Yeah.
So thanks to everyone today for being interviewed for Oxwide, and this is Lisa Tan.
Thank you to Lisa and everyone over there in the integrated therapies team at Goldie Lee, and that was a great insight into how the teams are adjusting to keep services running. Now, Maria, that was such an inspirational film we've just seen there. You must be very proud of your teams.
Oh, I think throughout the whole of this COVID, we're always always surprised with what happens. And that just is an example of the great work to ensure that children are included in all the activities and they can access it remotely. I love the bit about the forest, using the space outside Goldie Lee, really good. I have to say, Luca, thank you. We did need someone to be there for us. We'll send you the voucher. I'm sure you deserve something. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Maria. It was great, and thanks, Luca. And Goldie Lee, I mean, it's brilliant to have such a space actually available to us, isn't it? Such a good site for that kind of thing. Now, you mentioned COVID there, Maria, and as everyone's aware, the government's again announced tighter restrictions on us meeting up, the new rule of 6, and we're hearing about the possibility of more restrictions in future if we don't control the situation. And we've seen that some parts of England, Wales, in the news today about France, they're already putting in place local lockdowns, often to try to get ahead of the game this time rather than leave it as late as we did back in March. But what does this mean for us as a trust? And I'm joined now by Debbie Wheddon from Workforce. We've got Maria from Children and Young Peoples and Lisa Tan from our comms team to help us answer some of the questions you've been asking over the last few days. So Lisa, you've had the questions in. So can you start by kicking us off with something that our staff have been asking?
Lovely, thanks Matthew. We've had quite a few questions in, but they centre around two main themes, I would say. The first one is around schools, and largely people are asking what happens when their child's school bubble has to isolate for 14 days and they can't work remotely. What do they need to do? Perhaps you could help us with that one, Debbie, to begin with.
Yeah, of course, and I think it is a difficult one, and we've really recognised that it's been a tough time over the last few months for people when they've had the school shut, trying to juggle childcare and try and work. We've done a number of things, as people know, over the last few months. We extended the carers leave entitlement for the year from the 5 days to 15 days in recognition of these exceptional circumstances. But we also appreciate that that may not necessarily be enough for some. So we'd expect individuals to be able to have open and honest conversations with the managers, think creatively and slightly differently about what work could be done from home during that 14 period of isolation. But obviously we're conscious that the majority of our staff members are able to kind of continue working through this period, and we want to be able to embrace that. However, we are also conscious that there are a couple that may not be possible for. So if unfortunately you have exhausted your carers leave entitlement already, you may need to think about using your annual leave or potentially unpaid leave for this period. But we really recommend having an honest conversation with your manager. And I know in many cases they've tried to be as creative as possible as they can in terms of things that you can do from home. I know, Maria, we were talking about it earlier about some of the things that you've been doing in practice in Children and People. So I don't know if there's some helpful examples that you might be able to give to help people think.
Again, I think it's a real opportunity for us in some ways. Obviously, we can ask staff to do audits, we can ask them to get the supervision done and PDRs. But for me, one of the things that the children's nursing team did was they did a piece of research looking at a piece of equipment that would help us to take bloods from children. And we probably wouldn't have had time to do that piece of work. That has meant now we've got a new piece of equipment because it was an amazing piece of work. And our children, when we go to take bloods, they probably would have their blood taken at the first attempt because it just helps them. So I think we need to be creative, think what do we need to do for our service? We are moving forward, we're doing things in different ways. So it's an opportunity to give a set piece of work to somebody if they're at home. And then we know that work's been achieved, and that seems fair then to their colleagues, that they can see what work's been happening while they've been at home. Obviously, we've got a lot of staff within children's services that can work remotely. We're doing virtual assessments all the time, and I think we're sort of one of the highest directorates of continuing to do that. And we need to do that a bit more now, because with schools, schools will close every so often. So we need to change from virtual to face all the time. So we think that's a really important thing to be able to do.
Now, I was on a call last night with IFE, with Kevin Fenton, who's London's Public Health Director. He's brilliant, Kevin is actually, and he was talking us through what's happening just now. And what they talked about is they said that the level where you start to think, right, we need to do something here is when you get to about 20 cases per 100,000. And actually in the 3 boroughs we work in at the minute, predominantly Greenwich, Bromley and Bexley, and I know we're beyond that for prisons, but if we think about the 3 boroughs where we're doing the sort of primary lump of our services, really, the rate is well below 20 just now. We're at the better bit of London. The pressure's being felt more in inner London, but we are seeing the numbers starting to tick up. I think the critical thing for staff is going to be to make sure that they can get access to information on what we're doing as a trust to support them around PPE. We know that will always be a big factor here. The next thing is rapid access to testing. Because if you're in my circumstances, you know, if we'd got a test on Wednesday, we'd know by now whether actually we're all clear to go back to work. And I think we've had a rush, haven't we, on the tests, and so you'd expect it to clog up a bit, but hopefully that'll start to flow again. That will help. And the third thing is making sure actually we think about people's well-being as well, because this has been stressful. The summer, you know, having the kids at home and trying to work's been difficult. And I have to say, earlier this week, when we all found ourselves back at home in isolation again, it felt like we'd gone back 6 months. And I have to say, I felt pretty low for a day or two, you know, because you just think, oh, this has been a slog and here we go again. But, you know, we'll get on with it. We'll crack on. You know, I had a chat to one or two people and said that's how I was feeling. And it was really helpful to let off a bit of steam around this. But I think with all this, as Debbie said, it's talk to your line manager, we'll be creative and we'll do what we can to support people through this. So Lisa, what else have people been asking?
So around, there's no surprise, I guess, that this has come up around travel and holidays and people going abroad in the quarantine, because I think with the list of quarantine countries changing every day, that's one issue that people are sort of grappling with. But one of the questions that has come up is, what do people do if they go on holiday to a country that wasn't on the quarantine list when they went, but then gets put onto the quarantine list whilst they're away, and then when they come back, they have to isolate for the 2 weeks? If they've used all their leave, what is the situation there?
So Debbie, is that much different from the situation you outlined before, really?
It's probably not actually, and it's an interesting one, because if we'd followed the instructions originally, we'd have been in Tenerife right now, and we took the decision not to because of the changing climate. Rules are changing constantly, they're quickly, it may occur, and we know a lot of people are nervous about it. Government guidelines still say that do not travel for non-essential travel, the best words. So I think you just need to be able to really think carefully about your need for travel and the arrangements that you put in place if you do go, and that does happen. Really recommend, again, speaking to your line manager before you go, talk about what options that you do have that you may be able to work from home if you are required to self-isolate. But obviously, if your purpose of the trip is for compassionate reasons rather than holiday, again, have the conversation and flag that, because it may affect some of the options that might be available to you. So just be as open and honest, and we'll try and think as creatively as we can should that situation happen.
I don't know, Maria, have you encountered that with anyone within your services? It's, you know, we've had 1 or 2 people who've been affected.
Mm-hmm.
I know in my team.
We've had a few, but we have been able to manage it to date. They've had the discussion before they've gone on holiday, and these were holidays that were pre-booked. And as you say, then things have changed, and so they've had the holiday. It's only a few, but we have been able to manage it, and we haven't had anyone sort of stranded, which is good. So it's just, I think you're absolutely right. If you can have the discussion before you go, at least you know the potential of what can happen when you come back, so you can make an informed decision, which is much easier than just maybe assuming that you will be able to work from home. And for some jobs, that's just not possible. But
yeah, I think that's really important. And I think the message that's coming through anyway is just about keeping the conversations going. Because I must admit, when things change as rapidly as they do, it's really difficult at times to keep on top of all the guidance and know what you should and shouldn't be doing. And everyone interprets things slightly differently. So, you know, sort of the gathering together in a group of 6, I didn't realise it could actually be 8 if 2 of the 8 were under the age of 11, like my children. So if the ages of the children make a difference as well, it's the adults gathering, and I didn't realise that. Had you heard that?
No, I didn't know that until you said that. So that's, I've got to be honest, some of the guidance has been pretty hard to keep up with. And actually there's a bit of fatigue sets in as well. You know, you think, I don't want to read about this much more, but you have to. I mean, I think what's been consistent throughout the year is taking the sensible precautions. You know, it's been washing your hands, try not to touch your face, wear a mask if you're out and about, avoid crowded places and prolonged exposure. And, you know, there's been more and more research coming out about this. You know, if you're outside in the fresh air, there's very, very little risk of transmission, you know, and it's, whereas if you sit in an enclosed area and it's warm and it's muggy and there's not much air circulation, it's not a good place to be. So, I mean, I think to me, I've really sort of held to those core common sense things. And you try to keep up with the guidance as best we can. And that's why I think it's important that people keep a check on the Ox. And we'll have a look at the frequency with which we're putting out that communication about what's going on. And we'll let you know. Obviously, there is an exemption for work.
So you're allowed to have larger numbers in work, but we as a trust have deliberately not said we want to get everyone back into the office, because what I didn't want to do is say to everyone, get back to the office, and then 2 weeks later we have to turn around and say, hang on a sec there, because I think that what is happening at the minute, let's be clear, schools have gone back and people are going back to work. Of course, the incidence is going to increase. It's just, what can we do now to try to keep a lid on it and not let it get out of control this time?
I mean, certainly what we've been doing in the office is kind of a rota, just to make sure we can manage the numbers. So, because working remotely, it can get a bit challenging at times. It's quite hard being on your own all the time, especially in the comms team. We're used to having one another to sort of bounce off of. So we've had a bit of a rota going where there'll be sort of 2 of us in the office and then we'll switch it round. So it is just playing it by ear a lot of the time and trying to make it work as best we can.
But it's different in patient settings, though, isn't it? I mean, Maria, some of your services, they know that it's not really a discretionary, should we stay at home discussion, is it? It's, you've got to be there and you've got to be hands-on with the patients as well.
Yeah, I mean, our children's nursing team, they've been hands-on throughout, for instance, as some of our therapists have as well. They still are able to do a day, maybe a month at home, so they're catching up with different work that they're given to do at home. So what we're asking at the minute, that everybody comes in for a period of time. We've got rotas, as you say, so we know how many staff can be on the base, how many safely, and that way we can sort of ensure that staff are safe all the time, but also they get that contact of their teams. Because I do think it's important, you're right, to have that face-to-face now and then is really, really helpful. And that's what our staff told us when we asked them in the staff survey. So we found that would be useful. But it's still quite difficult, I think. It's still quite worrying coming back to work for a number of our staff, especially the staff that have been maybe isolated for a longer period of time, that have been shielded. I've been shielded. I haven't been able to go out. It is hard to do that. So I think it's really important how we support those members of staff coming back, and we're trying to make that one a softer approach, I think, really, so that it's a gradual, so they feel supported as they come in.
Okay, Lisa, what else have we been asked to do?
That's a good point, actually, because that's one of the final topic areas that we've been asked about, is shielding, because some people are sort of really struggling and have been shielding for 5 months or so, and they're asking about if and when and how they might be able to gradually reintroduce themselves to the workplace. But I guess we've kind of gone back a bit from that now, haven't we, over the last week? So what's the latest sort of advice around shielding and how to deal with that?
Well, I mean, I think lots of this again is about there's a couple of things. It's about what kind of job you do. It's about that conversation with your line manager. And there's also about something about how you feel yourself. I mean, our next door neighbour, Irene, she's in her late 80s now and fit as a fiddle, but is very frightened of going out in public at the minute still. And because, she knows that with, although she's very fit, she's still got some health issues, and and she's scared. And, talking to my mum and my dad, and other people as well who are younger than them who've got health conditions, they are worried about it. And I suppose part of it is about having a reasonable degree of risk. At the minute, the levels are so low, you'd be very, very unlucky to be in a place where there was someone with COVID. But the thing I always do, ever since I worked alongside A&E doctors, I always try to imagine myself explaining it to some very grumpy A&E doctors. And I think, did you do this and then this happened? Why were you standing up a ladder with no one holding the bottom? It's those kinds of things. If you put yourself in a position where it's crowded and busy and there's lots of people around and you find out you got COVID, you're going to think, yeah, I could have predicted that, really, couldn't I? I took a bit of an unhealthy risk there, really. Whereas if we do the kind of stuff we've been talking about and behave sensibly, we got to get on with life, but we've got to do it in a sensible way. There's all kinds of risks around us. Have conversations with people. And to Maria's point about the loneliness, I mean, I talked about wash your hands, don't touch your face, wear a mask, be sensible. There's also something about our psychological well-being as well, and about checking in with people and feeling comfortable to say, do you know what, I feel a bit lonely and I'm finding this hard, and I just like to let off steam a little bit, because I think if you're shielded just now, the prospect of that coming back in again is pretty daunting.
And actually, there's nothing to be ashamed of saying. What's the phrase? It's okay to not be okay. And I think we've just got to have the confidence to admit that you're struggling, pick up the phone to somebody. And actually, the number of people that I've spoken to have really found that valuable. So I think, Maria, thank you for kind of highlighting how it's felt for you. I think that's really important for people to know that they're not in that only situation of themselves. They just need to be able to reach out when they feel they need that support.
And I think it's positive now for these children that have been shielded for such a long time. I mean, we're getting those children back to school now. So these are ventilated children, the children with tracheostomies, you know, who would be one of the most vulnerable groups. But with risk assessments, working with schools, supporting the parents, that helps everybody. So I think you're absolutely right, Matthew. The risks are less and less as long as we do it safely. And that's the most important thing.
And it is worth bearing in mind, I mean, I think we hear a lot about the cases and everyone talks about hospitalisation and that, but actually at the start of this year, you know, the figures around ICU were grim, weren't they? It was 50% survival rate. Actually, that survival rate is now well over 70%. We're ventilating far, far fewer people because they've learned more about the condition. And actually, we now have a range of proven treatments. You know, there's various steroids and other things that we know actually help in COVID as well. So it's what, you know, there's not nearly as much about that in the press, I think. And we also have a couple of really good potential vaccines in the running as well. I know one of them, they stopped running the trials this week because they had an adverse event they want to look at. That's a good thing, because actually a responsible vaccine trial, you know, the thing to do with the vaccine is not roll it out before you've tested it on the population. I know Russia have given it a shot, good luck to them, you know, but I wouldn't be in the queue for that early on. What you want is a properly tested, well-tolerated, effective vaccine, like the flu vaccine, which we'll have coming out soon for staff as well. You know, if there's a vaccination that works and offers protection, take it. I mean, interestingly, they've had almost no flu in the Southern Hemisphere this year because people are doing hand washing and sensible things in the vaccination programme. You know, there are things we can do, and soon, with any luck, you know, COVID will be in that kind of place. And for now, we've got to look out for each other, haven't we? Okay, Lisa, was there anything else that staff really wanted us to pick up today?
Those are the three main topic areas that we've had in so far, and all of the questions fit within those, and I think have all been addressed. But we're keeping the email address open. So if anyone wants to send in further information or further questions or whatever, we'll make sure that we get that answered for them.
Okay, and Debbie, we can make sure that we keep our Q&A on the Ox ticking over and live, can't we, with all these new HR questions as they come up?
Absolutely, and I think guidelines are changing constantly, so we're reviewing them every couple of days as they happen anyway. So yeah, we will do.
And I think to follow Maria's lead, and, you know, talk to your line manager, talk to your service manager, and you know, we'll pull through this together, won't we, rather than alone. You know, that's the way that you get through these kinds of things. So, okay, well, I think that's probably enough for this week. I hope we've managed to address some of the concerns you've had. You know, as I said there, it'd be a mug's game to try to predict exactly how this winter's going to go. But the way we'll get through it is by working together in the way that we did earlier this year. It'll be by making sure that you have the things that you need to feel safe at work, that you've got the protective equipment, access to testing, and that you're talking to each other and we're looking after each other's well-being for what's going to be, you know, it'll be a slog, it'll be a hard haul this winter. But I think we've proven this year that we're a good team and we can work together as a team. As always, if you have any questions or queries, do visit the coronavirus latest page on the Ox. We'll be listing our latest Q&As on there, so please do look out for that. You can submit your own questions to us through that page as well. And what we will do is, if the guidance keeps changing in this way, we'll keep this kind of webcast format going, and we'll look at how often we communicate with you about COVID, because we know that managers need the information to answer the questions that they get from their staff, and that we all need to sort of share in this experience as we go through it together. We need to listen to what everyone's saying, make sure you're getting the information you need. So thank you very much there to Maria, to Debbie and to Lisa, and to the folk on the film from Goldie Lee. And we shall see you all again very soon. Take care.
Bye.